Good evening, everybody. Now, it should be in both streams, right? That's what should be happening. I should be in two streams now at once. I think that's what's happening. I think what's happening is I'm on two streams at once. If you send me a super chat, oh, that's definitely not good. Definitely don't want that. Okay. Hold on. Let me see. Okay. So what happened was I had two streams set up, and I started streaming to the wrong one. The later one is the one I jumped on. There's the following program, and then I jumped on and streamed. So anyhow, we're all good now. I'm streaming both. I'm streaming everywhere. Wow. That was terrible. That was really, really terrible. Okay. We're all on the same page now. If you send me a super chat, I'm going to be looking left and right because now I have two StreamYards open at the same time. God, I should really kill the other one. I'm going to kill the first one. Let me kill the first one. Let me start this over. I'm just going to kill that because it's not good. It's not going to be good. All right, those of you who are still over on the following program, Trump goes off in South Africa president stream. I'm gonna reset that. But I'm gonna do this on the all right, I'm just going forward. I'm ending that stream. Good evening, everybody. You're probably a little confused. That's because of me. I did something very, very confusing. What I did was I streamed to the wrong place. I had two StreamYards open. I started on the wrong one. I'm supposed to be doing one at 10:45, and I started streaming there instead of here where I was supposed to be at 9 o'clock. This is the Diddy stream. Let me start all over again. For those of you who are new to the Diddy world, which some of you may be, let me explain to you what happened today so you can appreciate what happened with the cross-examination and the entire fiasco that went down near the close of day 8 of the Diddy trial. Now, if you're following the Diddy trial, you're probably aware of the fact that there are 5 charges that have been brought against Sean Puffy Combs, Diddy, etc., a.k.a. PD, a.k.a. whatever. Those 5 charges include a RICO charge, 2 sex trafficking charges, and 2 charges for transporting folks interstate purposes of engaging in illegal sexual encounters. Now, we'll put the last 2 aside. Forget about them. In fact, we'll put the RICO aside and focus exclusively on the sex trafficking, which is 18 U.S.C. 1591. Under that statute, which was initially designed to stop people from creating sex slaves, and it was designed to try and discourage that by saying if you get caught doing that, we're going to give you 15 years minimum and a life sentence maximum. The state alleges that Sean Puffy Combs violated that with respect to 2 different individuals, hence 2 different charges. One of those individuals is a woman by the name of Cassie Ventura. Cassie Ventura is his longtime model/musician girlfriend. In or around 2007, when she was roughly 21 years old, after she already had a hit song, Sean Combs decides he's going to sign Cassie Ventura to a 10-album deal with his production label Bad Boy Records, and she signs off and is thrilled about this. And the relationship quickly alters from being a business relationship to being a personal relationship, and the 2 of them start dating. She falls very hard for Sean Combs, and she ends up having an on and off relationship with him for 11 years. Roughly near the end of the first year, if not sooner, Sean admits to Cassie that he has this thing that he likes doing, and that thing is watching his girlfriend getting shellacked by other dudes while he sits and watches and directs. And so he started, this is according to the testimony of Cassie, and this is according to the state. Testimony so far elicited is that she started engaging in what they would call freak-offs. She ended up, over the course of their on and off relationship for 11 years, engaging in hundreds of these freak-offs. The state alleges that these freak-offs are a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1591 because once he's paying the escort, that now turns it into commercial sex. And they are also alleging that she did it against her will. Those are the two key elements of 18 U.S.C. 1591. So that's what they need to prove, that there was this commercial sex activity that he was fostering, and that he was, and really that he was forcing her to engage in that. Now, if you heard the testimony of Cassie Ventura, who most people who had the privilege of hearing the testimony, and I would estimate that's fewer than 150 people on the planet, most of us who heard that testimony found her to be an incredibly believable witness. For a victim, she came forward and she just seemed very compelling and credible and believable. However, that's the good news for the state, because you need your star witness, who's the one who was allegedly trafficked, to sound credible. That's clearly a very important thing for the state. However, she also appeared very conflicted. She testified for 4 days, and midway when she was nearing the end, I was like, if she was asked whether or not she wanted to have sex with these men, I don't know what she would say. She seemed very conflicted. During the course of their relationship, according to Cassie's testimony, he started filming them, and not only filming them, but what would happen is she would go and they would have these marathon sex sessions, which initially were going for a couple of hours, then for 7 hours, then for 10 hours, then like regularly for days. And a freak off only ends when Diddy says a freak off is over. Keeps going. No one's allowed to stop. Not Cassie, not the performer. So, this is according to the testimony of Cassie so far and two escorts who have testified. Although the second escort, the Punisher, didn't seem like that his freak-offs were nearly as lengthy as the first one. The first guy, Daniel, he was testifying that sometimes he would wait for hours. Why is he waiting? Because they would have multiple sessions, and a session is defined as the dude finishing. Dude finishes, but he couldn't just finish. They would have to just go through this like slow motion type of sexual activity practically. And if they started going too fast and he would get close to finishing, Diddy would direct them to slow down. Make it take longer. And when he finally would finish, once, twice, Diddy would take Cassie frequently into a private room. It's a suite in a hotel. Take her into a private room and then spend time one-on-one with her in there. She testified about some of the stuff they did in there, and it's rather unsettling. But she really treasured her Diddy time. She fell very hard for Diddy. She clearly, and so much so that she was willing to degrade herself for Diddy. When she was talking about a relationship, she talks about the honeymoon period and then the start of the freak-offs and how she initially was doing this for Diddy. She wanted to do it for him. But over time, we start seeing the relationship become more and more abusive, physically abusive, him punching her out, hitting her so hard. There's a famous video in 2016 of him yanking her and throwing her to the floor and kicking at her and then starting to drag her down the hall. Horrific videos. No one could listen to the testimony and see the pictures and not think to themselves, this guy treats women monstrously. The question is whether or not these freak-offs, though, were against her will, because she seems somewhat conflicted. But it's not simply the physical violence. There's talk of the financial control, that he's controlling her allowance. He's taking care of her house. He's taking care of her car. He's overseeing her career. He's forcing her to make music and never releasing them. And she only gets paid if it gets released. So by not releasing any songs while making her work harder and harder for years producing songs, the state wants us to conclude that he was controlling her money, making it impossible for her to get away. And sometimes when she would talk about the abuse, she would say that she talked to someone. She's like, how does anyone ever get out of this situation? How is it possible to get out of this situation? Like, where would I go? This is my whole world. Where would I go? Sometimes in the middle of freak-offs, he would punch her out. He would drag her around by her hair. This is according to her testimony. And again, most people who watch her testimony found it to be fairly credible. But you're still left with a whole bunch of questions. And those questions include things like this. Why do you keep going back to him? She says it's an on and off relationship. She had another boyfriend in 2011, Kid Cudi, who's supposed to be testifying tomorrow. That's right. Kid Cudi is supposed to be testifying tomorrow. The whole courtroom is in a buzz about this. And that she's supposed to, and that he's using violence. He's threatening her, according to her. They threaten that if she doesn't listen to him, doesn't do what he wants, that he's going to release some of the videos, which she said she found to be humiliating, those videos. She hated that they were out there. She was continually trying to get rid of them. Whenever he would film them from her phone, she said she would delete them. As soon as she would see them, that was according to her. Well, anyhow. But a lot of people had questions. You got questions. Why are you going back to him? And the way that and her memory would seem a little hazy sometimes. It did. Sometimes. And apparently her memory got better and better leading up to trial. At one point she wrote it in a book. She wrote a book, and then she came to me and she said, I want you to pay me $30 million for the rights to this book. And he said, GFY. And she went to her civil attorney, filed a lawsuit for $30 million for the damages that he did to her. And the next day, Diddy's lawyers came and said, we'll give you $20 million, go away. And they said, okay. So she got her $20 million from Diddy, and then she sued the Intercontinental and got $10 million. Which means that, as far as we see, whatever financial damages she thinks she's entitled to, she has gotten her $30 million. Now, but when she was asked about that during her testimony, and this comes up today, not directly, but by reference, and I'll point out that reference. It comes up today in the sense that she said, when she was asked, would she give the money back to have never lived this? And she said, I would give anything back to get back my agency. Which I thought was a very unusual way to phrase it. I don't remember ever referring to my own agency. I don't remember ever in my life referring to my own agency. I thought she would just say, absolutely, for sure. It was a very strange turn of phrase. But that term, as far as agency, came up today with Dr. Dawn Hughes on the stand. Now, many of you may remember Dr. Dawn Hughes, that she was the expert witness in the Diddy trial. She was the one who testified again on behalf of Amber Heard. Saying that she was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Johnny Depp. She was skewered somewhat in her testimony, and one of the lines of attack that the Depp attorneys used on her is that whenever she's addressing something, she always finds domestic violence, and it's always the woman who's the victim, as if there's no such thing as a man who ever suffers from domestic violence, even though statistically that's just not the reality. With that in mind, she takes the stand today, and I'm going to tell you that her direct testimony that she gave this morning was very effective, in that a lot of what she said tracked some of the language that Cassie was giving when she was providing her testimony. In other words, it was almost like you could check off boxes. You could check off boxes as to what she's covering. So with that in mind, well, let me give you a reminder. So when she walks up there, and I didn't even recognize her, because again, these screens are very small. They're very, very small screens. So I did not recognize her when she first came up there. I was like, the name rings a bell. And all day long, I watched her, and I totally forgot that the woman who was testifying in front of me all day testifying in front of me, is this woman.
Documents did you review?
I'm going to refer to my list of documents. It is a 4-page.
You want to approach?
Dr. Curry, Dr. Hughes, I don't know why I keep
Oy.
doing that. Try to answer to the best of your ability. Just let us know you're consulting your notes, okay? Concern is that you not read from them, okay?
You can reference your notes, just don't read from them, okay?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Okay, great. Please tell the jury who Dr. Bonnie Jacobs is.
So Dr. Bonnie Jacobs was Miss Heard's therapist. May I refresh my recollection with my notes, Your Honor?
She's allowed to
For the
consult her
dates?
notes. Yes, you may consult your notes, yes.
Objection, Your Honor.
So I am going to refer
That's
to my
her.
designation that has the
That's
list so
her.
that I don't forget anything.
That's the woman. That's her right there.
Eventually.
So I administered.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
You just can't read. That you're not supposed to read from it, but you can refresh your recollection as you're speaking.
10 seconds later.
What Miss Heard did to Mr. Depp. So it was asking about both sets of behavior. And what the-
Objection, Your Honor. We're back to reading.
All right, Dr. Hughes, anything that you looked at referenced during your direct examination, if you could just turn that over so they can review that before cross-examination, okay? All right, thank you, ma'am.
I presume she wants to be able to
Penny was great.
take that back with her. and
We can
review
get copies
overnight.
of it. We'll get whatever it is,
Okay.
we'll make sure you get copies of it so she can keep her originals. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
All
I
right?
have copies of everything that I looked at. Other than
Okay,
my,
well, no, we're not talking right now. Court's in
other
session.
than my
All right. Well, anyhow, that's Dr. Hughes there. And she was testifying in front of me today. And again, on direct, she was very good. And she comes out there and she says that she's a clinical and forensic psychologist and that she specializes in treating trauma. She's been doing this for 30 years. She's got a private clinical practice. I'm not going to need the headphones the rest of this show. So let's lose that. And that she is part of the American Psychologist Association and victims of trauma, violence, and abuse. And she's part of the voluntary faculty at Cornell. And that in addition, she does forensic work where she gives comprehensive psychological assessments in order to assess whether or not someone is psycho or has been psycho as a result of trauma from domestic violence. And I want to, before I go any further, I am going to pause and get this out of the way. Because invariably, if I talk about something like this, there are some people out there, men or women, who are victims of domestic violence. And if you are a victim of domestic violence, that is not at all a joke. And I'm certainly not going to be making jokes about anyone who's actually suffering from that, man or woman, because it's terrible. And I urge you to please find the strength to get help, So no one should take anything I'm saying or any critique I make of Dr. Hughes during this stream as in any way trivializing the significance of domestic violence, which is a far more rampant issue and problem in our society than most of us may realize. So again, if you are a victim, my heart goes out to you sincerely 100%. And I urge you, do whatever you can to get help. And call hotlines and don't think you can get out. Okay? Don't be Cassie. Don't be Cassie, because Cassie was just beaten emotionally, physically, psychologically, beaten all the time. And it's terrible. And finally, thank God, she was able to get out of that situation. Finally, after dealing with it on and off for 11 years. No human should ever have to go through that. So if you find yourself in that situation, I beg of you, please try to find help, no matter how terrible or how hopeless it seems. That being said, let's go forward. Now that I got that, I want to I need to check that off so everyone understands my position in general about domestic violence. And if you are someone who's beating someone, get help, okay? Because you're destroying multiple lives. You're destroying your own life. You're consumed with your own hate and self-hatred, and you need to get help because what you're doing is ultimately evil. All right, getting back to Dr. Hughes and her specialty. She says that she specializes in interpersonal violence, which in the Depp trial she called IPV. She never really used that term today. That she's treated thousands and that she's board certified and 30 years. And she says been previously qualified 65 times to testify at trial. Have you ever not been qualified when you came to appear at a trial? No. Every time I'm qualified. So at this time, we request that the state will qualify her as an expert in domestic violence. Any objection? Nope. Go for it. Okay, you are hereby qualified. When a witness is qualified as an expert witness, it changes the entire nature of their testimony. First and foremost, in discovery, there's a lot of pre-steps that have to be done before trial whenever you're proposing an expert witness. An expert witness is nothing like a normal witness. It's different in multitude of ways. First and foremost, an eyewitness is only allowed to testify about things that they know, things they saw with their own two eyes. That's what you're testifying about. That's hence the phrase eyewitness. What did your eye? The mouth speaks what the eye saw. That's eyewitness. I saw it, now I'm speaking about it. In stark contrast, an expert is not talking about what they saw or any facts relevant to this case, particularly in a criminal proceeding. When you're talking about an expert of this nature, they're not even allowed to know what happened. The objective in putting them up there on the stand, the reason you put them there is to facilitate that the jury should understand a complex area of science or something else, but in this, it's the social sciences or psychological sciences, that they can understand how people think, act, and what is customary and normal. We should anticipate and expect that we will see a battle of the psychological experts. I can tell you right now that we will get a psychological expert from Diddy's side who will sit there and try and refute what Dr. Hughes talked about today. We know that's happening. There is even reference to it being forthcoming during Dr. Hughes's testimony. Now, as an expert witness, you can opine, you can give your own opinion, you can speculate, you can take much broader term, and in this case, she's not allowed to talk about things that she's seen relevant to this case. That's taboo. That's what I mean when I say it's the exact opposite. Let me get this out of the way. Jojo, man. I was taking a shower this morning, washing my Diddy, and I realized I can't do this for 14. Oh man. I do have a tankless water heater. Hot water, no problem. How can someone do this? Help. I don't have answers for you. I'm sorry. Worcestershire! How ignorant must prosecution be to have Amber Heard useless court therapist? Stupid DA. It's so good to see you, Worcestershire. So good to see you. An actual leader of the following. She is a leader. It's true. These mistakes don't happen. You're failing our entertainment expectations. Boomerism is expected. He's referring to the fact that I started on the wrong stream. I don't know how that happened. I mean, I know how it happened. I just can't believe I did that. All right. She gets qualified. She is now an expert witness. The first thing she explains, and I thought that the lawyer was struggling, and I'm very surprised, and I'll tell you this. The lawyer was Maureen Comey, and she seemed to struggle today. I'm not going to kid you, certainly during the direct testimony, in ways I don't recall ever seeing her struggle before. Just a lot of things that she was questioned, she would ask, objections sustained. She was dealing with that a lot. I saw more chinks in her armor today than I remember seeing in the multitude of times I've watched her handle direct and cross combined. This was a terrible day for her. although she had some strong stuff on redirect. We'll see. I want you to know the fireworks that come start really when we get to the cross, but also on the redirect, and then also on the recross. It's back and forth of fireworks. You're going to enjoy it. Stick it out with me. Trust me. I'll try to work my way through the direct a little bit faster so that we can make up some time and get through this efficiently. Okay? All right. So let me work my way through the direct relatively quickly, because that's stuff you need for background to understand what's happening here. And then I'm going to, and then we'll savor, we'll spend more time savoring the cross. All right. So she says she's a blind expert, meaning I haven't looked at any facts. I am not examining the facts of this case. What I know is an overview of what's been happening here, but I don't know the parties. I've never met with them. I've never sat with them. I'm just here to give a lecture, like a seminar to the jury as to what it's like to be part of domestic violence. And the 4 areas she said she's coming to testify is, number 1, why do they stay? Why don't they leave? That's first and foremost. Secondly, their coping methods. What are normal coping methods for someone who's dealing with the trauma of suffering through domestic violence for an extended period of time? Number 3, how do they tend to discuss the relationship? What methods and what format and how does it tend to come out? Number 4, and finally, their memory. How it affects, how prolonged trauma like this affects their memory. Those are the 4 things she said she's going to testify. All right. And she said that someone who conducts domestic violence is trying to instill fear and control. Objection, non-responsive, on and on. So many times. Every time there would be a question from Comey, it's like she would ask one question and we would get a 7-paragraph answer from Hughes that she just start going on and on and on. And he'd be like, and the lawyer, Agniflio, was like, this is not responsive. There's no question. She's just talking about other stuff. Sustained over and over again. Those objections were sustained. And that's what I mean when I say she looked like she was really struggling. It just looked like it was a little bit out, it was helter-skelter and out of control. All right. She said she was retained by the government and that she gets paid $600 per hour, $6,000 per day. Okay. Why do people stay in abuse? They don't want to be abused. They're aware of the abuse, and even strong people can be abused. Objection, this is not responsive. She asked, why do people stay in abuse? And you start describing who stays in abuse. Oh, okay. Why they stay. Number 1, it's not just about the hitting, but it makes them feel trapped. So there's an emotional element to it. They feel that they're trapped and they can't get out. Number 2, they tend to have a love and attraction for their abuser. And that paired with the abuse makes it hard for them to leave. Number 3, the abuser creates psychological issues and restricts their higher order planning. What is that? Well, that's what you need in order to actually formulate a plan. So if they're going to leave, they have to figure out, okay, I can't just walk out the door. I have to go somewhere 10 minutes later. So because of their abuse, they just can't even, they're not in a state of mind that they can engage in the higher order planning that's required to leave. So as a result, when they get, she said, when they get hitten, and I was like, hitten? It's just hit. Past, it's not like smitten. When they get hitten, when we get hitten, we feel fear. We walk on eggshells to avoid getting hurt. And the fear, she says, is different levels of fear. Low level fear is like when you get butterflies in your stomach, when you're nervous about meeting someone. High level fear are thoughts like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. And she said, when we have high level fear, we can't process properly. And that people who are engaging in regular abuse, particularly if it's a physical abuse, are dealing with high level fear, but it even could be psychological abuse, that they're dealing with high level fear. How do threats play into that? They say threats can be as impactful as violence, and it's playing into the fear. Talked to us about psychological violence. Violence. She said that's intimidation and threats. And they said, they said, taught us about psychological distress. What does that mean? So she said that's PTSD. It's trying to keep safe, and you're not able to process on how to escape, because you're just, every time something happens, you're so edgy because you're afraid that you're going to get smacked, either emotionally with some comment about, wow, you're really fat today, or like, a physical slap across the face. So either type of conduct, which is really what a-holes do, is designed to just sort of keep them continually edgy. And then it's actually purposeful. How does sexual abuse play in? Also PTSD and a high degree of psychological abuse. What prevents them from leaving? So she said shame, humiliation, degradation, and you can't talk about it to get help because you feel so embarrassed by the situation that you can't go and talk about it. What about emotional abuse? So she said that's when someone gets demeaned or degraded, and it ends up putting them in a sense of depression, where they just give up trying because they feel a hopelessness about their situation. What about financial abuse? So she said, well, each of us need resources to live. And if you don't have access to tangible resources like housing or transportation or access to a laptop, you can't go anywhere. You're stuck there. Now, this was part of what played in very well to what Cassie was saying, because she's like, where can I go? How can I go anywhere? He pays for my house. I have no money. He pays for my house. He pays for my car. He pays for my phone. How am I supposed to go anywhere? So I was like, okay, that's really tracking very neatly to what she said. And that's very helpful for the state. Let me see if I can get this thing. I can't get this thing. All right. Then she said how these factors interact. She said they all interact and work in different times. Sometimes you'll be feeling the financial stress. Sometimes you'll be feeling the abuse of the sexual. Different things will play on the victim's mind at different times. How severe and the longer the duration of the abuse is, the more impact it's going to have. What about periods of positivity and neutrality from the abuser? So this was an interesting thing, because there was a lot of talk from Cassie about how there were many times that Diddy, during their relationship, that he would be really, really nice to her and just, flattering her and lavishing her with gifts. And Dr. Hughes was saying that's part of the control, that they'll give that carrot type of thing intentionally because they want to keep you under their control, particularly when they think that there's a threat of you leaving. So there's a threat of you going. They want to entice you and remind you of the honeymoon days when everything was all lovey-dovey. So in order to do that, so they start acting very sweet, and that's part of the control. It's not that they're just nice now. It's like that's part of them being controlling. And she said that basically, and I thought this was a great comment that she made. So they'll go through a cycle of abuse. Will be sometimes love, and then sometimes abuse. And it ends up feeling like there's a slot machine. And one of the reasons that they'll stay is because they'll feel like, okay, I'm hoping I'm going to get lucky that today is going to be a good day, and that they're going to be nice to me today. And it's like playing a slot machine, as to like, most of the time you end up the loser. But so many times you're sitting there, people will still get addicted and go back to the slot machine. And I thought that was a really great analogy that she provided there. She said the good feeling of winning love, and it creates a very powerful bond, because those good times are so treasured that it creates what she ends up describing and calling it a trauma bond, a trauma bond. That because of the trauma, when you're nice to them, they feel so happy and so connected that it's like a high they can't get somewhere else. That they're just like, oh, he's finally showing me love. So she referred to that as a trauma bond and said that could be stronger than than a bond people will feel on a day-to-day basis in a healthy relationship. And she said it can explain to us what love bombing is. And she said love bombing is like in the honeymoon phase when they're trying to leave and you shower them with loving gifts. And that's why it ends up taking multiple attempts to leave. Most people who leave, don't get out. They'll end up going back over and over again. Again, this was very consistent with what we heard from Cassie, that she's dating Diddy today, and then she's not, and then she's leaving him and running away and going back to her mother, and crying about how abusive he is and how he's blackmailing her, and then she's right back with him the next week or 2 days later. How she's in South Africa filming a movie and she says, give me any calls from him. I don't want to hear from him. Don't mention his name. And then she'll come back home and she goes right back into the relationship and let's do a freak off. So that was all very consistent with her testimony. All of this was very, very consistent. Let me take care of something really quick here just to make sure that okay. So they end up going to a pattern of return and reconciliation for love or attention, and part of the reason that they'll go back is because they'll be like, it's not working. He's still following me. He's still there. He's still calling. He's still contacting me through my friends. I'm not free of him. I might as well go back. All of this was basically, you could hear Cassie's voice in your head just talking about like how she's like, I'll never get free of him, or he keeps calling, or his coworker is coming over to me and telling me Diddy wants to see you. Where are you? And that no matter what she does, she can't get free. So like I said, I thought this went a long way towards filling in some of the questions that we had about why is Cassie doing what Cassie's doing. Almost like you're in a horror movie and you're watching and she's telling the story over and you're screaming, don't go back and don't go in the pool. Don't go in the pool. Don't go in the pool. Why are you in the pool? I told you not to go in the pool. That's what you felt like when you're listening to Cassie. Like, why? Stay away from the dinner. Stay away. Now you're doing why? Oh, also they talked about, using drugs, and that drugs are another method of trying to keep them hooked. And she said that, which we know that was going on. She wasn't using drugs before Diddy, and she started using drugs with him. It was just this cycle of awful. Just a cycle of awful. And she talked about coping mechanisms. So she said there's formal and informal. I want you to remember what I'm saying now. Just pause and just listen, because this comes up in a hilarious way on Defense. She says in coping, there's formal and informal methods. What are formal? Well, formal is when you go to outside help. You go to the police or human resources or a clinical psychologist or some other healthcare provider, and you say, I need help in this situation. And what's informal? Informal is when you talk to family or friends, you get support or get them to talk to the abuser and say, hey, can you stop hitting her? And then there's also personal, which is when you talk to the abuser directly and try and placate, and sometimes even fighting back within the relationship is a way of trying to get the abuse to stop. Most commonly used is personal, where people hope for change and return to the honeymoon phase. And she said people use different strategies at different times, and they use more coping as there's more abuse heaped on. She also said a common theme is apologizing and going along with things that we don't want to do, placating and compliance. Placating and compliance, which this seems to basically be saying, you mean like doing freak-offs and having sex with strangers for like 2 days at a time. Yeah. She didn't ask that because Dr. Hughes is not supposed to know anything about this case. But we could all hear that in our heads, like, oh, okay, I can understand compliance. That's what we saw from Cassie. What about placating? Sexual facet? It's really in all facets. If you can't say no to little things, it's hard to imagine they have agency to say no sexually. There's that agency word. Look at that. It's hard to imagine they have agency to say no to sexual requests. And as soon as she used that word agency, I'm like, this is the second time I'm hearing this word agency, and I've never heard anyone use it in this form before. And I was like, she's really tracking the language here. Like, wow. And I wondered, maybe Cassie got that in therapy, the concept of reacquiring her agency. It's just such a weird thing to say. I actually asked Lady Lawgic this. I was like, she's like, I don't even know what it means. I said, it's used to say control over your own life. She's like, I never heard that before. Neither, I don't think people don't talk that way. They just don't talk that way. Am I crazy? Am I crazy for thinking that? It's happy freedom. I need to. So, yeah. That was all. Yeah, that was what she gave us this morning. Was there more? Oh, there was more. I gotta fly through more of this direct. So she said there's passive self-dependence and blocking and what's passive self-defense? That's blocking or curling in a ball to avoid severe injury. And when she's talking about this, you can picture Cassie curling in a fetal position while Diddy's kicking her. If you saw the video of the Intercontinental that I was airing here last night, you get the picture of like, yeah, okay, that's passive self-defense as opposed to active, which is physically fighting back, and use a lot of strategies, both passive and active. Then there's avoidance strategies, which is not thinking, or dissociative, not dealing. I'll deal with it later. Dissociative. There's a word which Cassie used all the time. She said that one of the reasons she wanted to use ketamine when she was engaging in this freak-offs is because it had a dissociative effect on her, that she goes out of her body and she's not experiencing it, which is another sign that she's not really complying, that she's doing what she feels she has to do. You don't do something you have to do and then try and just and try and like blot it from your brain. What about substance abuse? Well, that's to numb the pain and alter the experience. Preventive. It can be preventative. I'm going to take drugs to avoid the psychological pain of what's coming when he gets home. But the victims sometimes express a great deal of love. Yes, that's part of the trauma bond. Even years after, they'll express great love for their abuser. Even years after they get away, they'll often express great love for their abuser. Which is like I said, everything here, it was filling all the questions we had. Why is it she seems so conflicted when she's on the stand? Why is it she seemed like, to me, that she would just as soon have Diddy over for dinner next week as send him away for the next 50 years? And all of this was being answered by Dr. Dawn Hughes on direct. What about disclosure? Well, it's not common for a victim to disclose soon after the abuse. There's a fear of not being believed, or the shame of being embarrassed, and also the economic change they may be facing, or a change in their relationship that they might not feel ready for. And the closer they are to the perpetrator, the less likely they are to disclose to anyone. What if the abuser is a perceived authority figure? Well, that would just amplify their power and make it less likely to disclose because they don't feel anywhere they go is going to be safe. And again, all of this was just neatly packaging as if she was talking about Cassie, but didn't know Cassie went through this. It's designed to make us feel as if what we saw from Cassie is what we should be seeing from someone in this circumstance. Often when they start to disclose who they go to, a trusted friend, a mother, a sister, And then they said they disclose piecemeal, not getting in one sitting. There's too much trauma and pain, and it comes back slowly. And they'll try to minimize the terribleness of it, distancing themselves from being, because they don't want themselves to label themselves a victim, and they don't want to label their attacker as being abusive, which is, you can picture Cassie again. She never told her mother at all. She was just like distancing from it and pretending, it's not that bad. And the only thing to get past that is years of therapy. And then she talked about hedging language is when they start getting therapy, they'll refer to it not as that time they were getting beaten, but they'll say, when that thing happened. Let's talk about memory. Okay, so the trauma impacts memory, vivid memory. You'll have vivid memory with lack of detail. And it cuts across different trauma groups. Doesn't matter whether it's domestic violence or military or police. People who go through a difficult trauma, they tend to have vivid memory of this and all the stuff around it, one nugget, and the stuff around it will just be a complete haze. But the core part they'll remember, central details. And sometimes they'll have a central detail which has nothing, like nothing that's that big a deal. Like they'll focus on something in the moment. While they're getting beaten, they'll just be staring at curtains in the window, and they'll just remember the curtains in the window because they're trying to dissociate when they're going through the physical or emotional pain. And sometimes people do it consciously, that they'll focus on something. Sometimes it's unconscious, that they don't even realize they're doing. They're just sort of zoning out. There's a lack of you'll see a lack of completeness, but that does not mean that what they're testifying about is unreliable. This is a big thing because you want the jury to believe her and say she's reliable. Sometimes they'll deliberately try not to remember because it's too painful. And that's called, there's directed forgetting, which is they intentionally try to forget, or dissociating, which is involuntary. And the frequency, they say that chronic trauma events keep memories from forming and repeated events blend together. So Cassie would be like, oh yeah, I got hit all the time. Well, can you tell us about sometimes? No. Why? Well, it blends together. And the example that Dr. Hughes used is, I can tell you that I've been to my favorite pizza place 40 times, but I can't remember the 27th time because it all just starts blending together. She said, but trauma doesn't stay in the background. It eventually will come out. And explain what hypervigilance is. Hypervigilance is scanning for danger, bringing characterization of being in the moment. And they say you can recall that they can have trauma get recalled by various cues. It can be a sight, a smell, a sound, the way someone laughs, and all of a sudden it'll just give a flashback to them, which will just trigger the trauma that's been buried in their head. And there you go. That's what we got from. All right, no further questions. Now we got our whole lecture seminar as to the mindset of a DV victim. And let's start the cross. So Agniflio is like, let's get into the cross. Are you ready for the cross? You ready for the cross? This part was still before lunch. He said, you sit in an office and talk with people at length. Yes. You pay attention to detail. Yes. Their manner of speaking. Yes. A detail could be important. I wouldn't say any detail, but some details are. It could be. Your experience taught you to listen closely. Yes. You wouldn't diagnose without listening to everything in your clinical practice. That's correct. Comprehensive. You're looking at a lot of things at a time. Yes. Both clinical and forensic, yes. And the approach of this guy, Agniflio, is very, very interesting. I mentioned this once or twice before. He can be very charming. And when he's talking, he's just sort of like laid back, like almost like he's trying to learn. At first, I wasn't crazy about his style, but I'm growing to appreciate it more. I am growing to appreciate it more and more. I'm not going to kid you. Someone referred to his style, someone I was talking to, as being like a submarine attack. Like you don't see it coming. You don't see it coming, and all of a sudden, boom, he's there. And I think that's a good way of describing it. I think that's a pretty good way of describing it. So moving forward, he said, in forensic is context of legal system, yes. And over there, you're going to be very careful because it's going to be reviewed by courts and lawyers. Well, not because, but yeah, I will be careful. And for forensic, you're going to go to many other sources, yes. In forensic setting, you listen to what the people say. Well, it's much more than that. Well, in forensic setting, the person may have motivations, right, for what they say. Yeah. And you'll approach with skepticism. Yeah. Maybe do a deeper dive beyond just hearing what they say. Yes. And a witness reports. When you look at witness reports, you look at police reports. Yeah. Psychological testing. Different tests were developed by experts. There's a lot of different psychological tests, right? Yeah. And you rely on those tests. Well, a multi-method that I use. Are you familiar with malingering? What malingering is? You know what malingering is? Yes. So can you tell us what that is? It's like exaggerating? No, it's not exaggerating. It's fabricating a symptom, an emotional symptom. So people can fabricate an emotional response? Yeah. And then she started talking about built-in validity scales in order to figure out whether they're fabricating a response. All right. And then we hit lunch. So like I said, he was working his way through. Okay. Working his way through. Now's when we get to the good part. Buckle up. I'm just going to show you this, okay? I want to show you something, okay? This is the testimony, okay? When you see a star, that means, okay, this is something I definitely need to talk about. It's like star, star, submarine, star, star, wow. I couldn't believe some of this stuff. It was great. Okay, here we go. Okay, you talked about, so he said, he's like, now, you did blind test. This is like a blind analysis. So you never spoke with Cassie, right? You didn't review the testimony from the first part, the first week of trial, did you? No. And to be clear, you're not rendering opinions about specific individuals. No. You don't know anything about Cassie or her mental state. That's true. And you talked about memory, coping, and reporting. Now, you've testified about this topic, memory, coping, reporting. Those topics that you brought up today, you testified about that at a lot of trials, right? Yeah. Some testimony doesn't involve the same people. It's the same testimony, but it's never involving the same people, the same evidence. You're telling over the same story, but it's never involving the same people in the next trial. It's not involving the same evidence in the next trial. You're just telling over the same thing. And again, she's like, yeah. How many years have you been giving the same testimony at these different trials? Well, I don't know. It's the same testimony. All right. But along the lines of what you testified today, how many years have you been giving that in trials? You said since 1999. Wow, 25 years. 25 years. Okay. You never share info about your patients, like with police? No. You never share it with the court? No. And you incorporate what you learn from your clinical treatments. You're incorporating that into your understanding of this area, right? Yeah. It's significant, right? You're incorporating that into your understanding of how domestic violence patients work. Yeah. Okay. So when you're relying on your own stuff, you're not reporting it to anyone. No one can check your conclusions, right? Well, that's correct. Not me. If you reach a conclusion about someone, and now you're using this in your analysis, no one knows no one can check whether or not you did it right. Right? I can't check. The court can't check. The police can check. You're sitting here doing your own little research, telling us what conclusions you have, but no one else is able to check whether or not you're right. No one can look into your patients. She goes, I guess that's true. All right, let's talk about the coping strategies. You mentioned formal and informal coping, right? Yeah. What was now, formal you said was when they go to the police or some healthcare professional, right? Yes. And informal coping is when they go and talk to friends and family. Yeah, that's right. You didn't talk about coping by talking to a civil attorney, though. Right away, I was like, here we go. Here we go. Because Cassie, like the second person she ever spoke to about this was her lawyer. So it's like, people, so he follows up, he's like, people go to a civil attorney to get money, right? Just like, objection, speculation. Move along, counselor. All right, well, let's talk about memory. Someone has a hazy memory. So now let's imagine the first time they talk about it, they have a bit of a hazy memory. And then they talk to a civil attorney, and the second time they talk to someone, their memory is a lot less hazy. Objection sustained. Oh my God. It's like now he's like, yeah, okay. Basically, you're sitting here saying to us, like, yeah, they can't form their memories. Maybe the memory was formed for Cassie by her civil attorney. And she goes, that's the first person she's talking to here, one of the first people. What about prevarication? So Hughes is like, yeah, that means lying. Yeah, that means lying. Yeah. Can that be a factor? Prevarication, could that be a factor in what we hear from a domestic violence abuser? Yeah. That's not neurobiological, correct? Yeah. That's for other reasons when we see prevarication. Yeah. And he said, you trained other experts, right? And she's like, what? You trained other experts in, she said, oh yeah, for battered women experts. This led to a sidebar. And there was a lengthy sidebar. It was long enough that they sent the jury out. And there was a long debate here where the area that he wanted to attack Dr. Hughes about is that she had given a seminar where she's teaching experts how to best prepare, experts in domestic violence, how to best prepare to be effective witnesses. So he wanted to ask her about this. And his objective really was to say, this woman's a cuckoo go nuts crazy person who she thinks she's all about battered women and everyone is a battered woman. And that's where he wanted to go here. Now he wants to say she sees a battered woman everywhere she goes. So that's where he was trying to go. That this is just her deal. Her deal is that she's calling everyone a battered woman. So he wants to ask about this seminar she gave. And the back and forth between the government and the defense was they wanted to introduce some document which showed her itinerary for this seminar. And the government says it's inadmissible to show bias. He wanted to say, so now he's like, it's showing that she's crazy biased. And that's why we want to get this. So Comey argues, and she goes, there's nothing in this sheet which shows bias. It just says, here's some tips, like how to get ready, to how to face the jury, how to present yourself, all of this stuff are things that she was presenting as tips for people who are going to be engaging in serving as expert witnesses. So Agniflio says her history shows bias, and what I want to admit, the organization that got funding from the DOJ, from the Division of Violence Against Women, she doesn't just give opinions, but puts in perspective who she is. Suggested she's just on direct. When she spoke on direct, she had this air of authority, like she's coming from the halls of academia, when that's not where she's coming from. And that's why I want to just be able to throw that out there. So the government says the sideshow where we would have to go through the entire itinerary with her and her testimony on our redirect. And he's like, well, the rules for admission are very broad. So the judge says, okay, you don't need the document to be admitted, but I'll let you use it. You can ask about it. You can ask questions about it. And you can use it to refresh her recollection or to impeach her if she says something wrong. But nothing in the document shows her bias. So, yeah, accordingly, for now, let's keep it out. I thought that was the right call by the judge. I thought that was a fair and reasonable call. By and large, I haven't spoken so much about this judge. I will tell you this. Early on, I thought he was phenomenal with his decisions on sustain, object. Like, really, like, whenever I hear someone say objection, I think to myself, if I was the judge, would I sustain or overrule? And based on my own personal bias, I assume I'm always right. So if I tell you that the judge was correct, like over and over and over again on day one, whether he was calling sustain or overruled, no matter who, whether it was direct or whether it was the state or the defense, I thought he was great. I felt he's missed a few over the last few days, but by and large, I think that his calls have been pretty strong. Pretty strong. I've been relatively impressed with him. Relatively impressed. All right. Let's get into where the fireworks really start. In 2015, you gave a presentation, advocates on battered women. Yes. And that was to expert witnesses who are giving testimony in domestic violence cases. Yes. And there were 4 parts to this seminar. And you teach them how to navigate cross and direct, healing. And so this is all basically healing and coping of experts. And she laughed at that. Like, you're trying to help them cope with being an expert witness. She goes, I guess so, yeah. You talk to them about how they should conduct themselves on the stand, know your audience, yeah. Most of your income comes today from testifying. So she goes, today, meaning Wednesday? Well, yeah, Wednesday, but also last year, the year before. Most of your income comes not from being a clinical psychologist, but from testifying. So she said about 60%. And you're getting $600 per hour. Yeah. That's a lot of money. Well, it's commensurate based on my experience in this field. All right, back in the 20th century, in the 19s, you used to write papers. Yeah. In 25 years now, you haven't been writing any papers. And you've been retained here. You've been retained by the hundreds of times. Yeah. She's like, well, and she's like, it's not hundreds. I think I said 65. But you never testified on behalf of a man accused of a sex crime. That's correct. I haven't, because that's not my expertise. Okay. How many meetings did you have? You had a number of meetings with the government. Yeah. Did you meet with the government after there was opening statements? Yes. So after we laid out our strategy in opening statements, you met with the government. Yeah. And after key witnesses have testified, you met with the government. Yes. After Cassie testified, you met with the government. Yes. So the government didn't give you specific areas to testify about? I don't understand. Well, you met with them after all his testimony. They didn't give you specific areas for you to testify about? She's like, she looks confused, and she goes, "You came up with all that by yourself?" Government's like, "Can we have a sidebar?" The whole room was like, "Oh!" It's like, because he's basically calling her out. You know, it's interesting. When I was giving my assessment, my recap of the morning report, I never really thought about this, but I was like, she really is doing a remarkable job of tracking the language that Cassie used. And Agniflio apparently picked up on the same thing. And he's like, it's not possible that she would give testimony that happens to be so perfectly in line with the same language and the same issues that Cassie presented. It's not possible unless there was some sort of direct expression from the government to Dr. Hughes letting her know how Cassie testified. It doesn't make sense. Like, how many times did I say this is nicely tracking, talking about agency, talking about, you know, when she's describing the cycling back, all the different things she talked about, it sounded like she was describing Cassie to a T, and she didn't hear her testimony. She doesn't know anything about her testimony, and she's meeting with the government after Cassie testifies, and they never told her anything about her testimony. They didn't direct her, hey, you might want to cover the whole agency thing there. Cover the whole getting your agency back, because she talked about it. They didn't say anything like that to you? No? Okay. All right. And he goes, they didn't, after the sidebar, he goes, so the topics, they never talked to you about what topics they want to discuss with you? So she says, as you know, before the trial even started, we had to give you disclosures about what I was going to be testifying about. So he's like, yeah, but you met 6 to 8 times. These lawyers needed to meet with you 6 to 8 times to figure out what you're going to talk about? Were you giving them a seminar about how... Were you giving them a seminar about how to question experts? Because she's like, I was talking to them about how to best present. She actually said, I was talking to them about how to best present and elicit for me what I needed. So that's why I was meeting with them. So she's like, were you giving them a seminar on how they should question an expert witness? And the whole room was like, oh my God. Because it's true. It sounds crazy. I need to sit and meet with them about how to elicit testimony. And it's like, they're freaking DOJ lawyers. They're some of the best lawyers in the city. You're sitting here teaching them how it is that they're supposed to question you? Why does that make any sense? That doesn't make any sense. So when he asked that question, were you giving them a seminar, how to question experts? Objection, withdrawn. You don't have to answer that question. That's a question you ask the jury hears and starts thinking to themselves, yeah, what the hell's going on here? What the heck's happening? All right, let's talk about the time period. All right. Your name gets disclosed as a witness, and the government relays what they'd like you to testify about, right? That's the way this whole thing goes. Yeah. Okay. And then it wasn't just about your testimony, though. You even gave them advice about your testimony. You're giving them advice on how to handle your testimony. So she's like, well, that was about Dr. Bernay, because who's going to be testifying on behalf of the defendant, because and preparing and trying to rebut him. I'm trying to rebut my testimony. You help them with their briefs. Yes. So that you can help the government prosecute my client. Yeah. So you're working for the government. Well, I don't know. I would say that. You're getting paid by the government, not by the National Endowment of Sciences. You're getting paid by the government. Yeah. And you were consulted after the trial started. Yeah. And you say you're here as a blind expert. Right. You don't know anything about the facts at all. No. I have nothing further. And the whole room was gasping because he's pointing out how insane the claim she's making sounds. It sounds crazy. So you're going to tell us you're meeting with the government all the time. The government's paying you money. You're helping them with the briefs. You're consulting with them after Cassie's testifying, and you don't know anything about what she testified about, but you happen to be answering questions that are exactly like what she testified about. And you want us to believe that and you're not really working for the government. You're an independent, expert here. You're working with them on the briefs. I mean, how much you could take an office here? It sounds crazy. Response. Sorry, late on this one. This came a long time ago. I'm a lingering response. I'm lingering at getting pulling your super chat up. Now in comes Maureen Comey. And she's like, you're a board certified clinical psychologist, right? Yes. How many of them are in New York City? Roughly 40. Oh, okay. How do you get there? How do you get to be that? And she starts explaining taking tests and how hard, whatever, to be the point that Maureen Comey is trying to get is it's not like they have 1,000 choices here. And she's, top in her field. You deal with memory in your clinical practice? Yes. This is now the redirect. She said, did you review any facts from this case? No. Did you review, in fact, when you looked at those briefs, you looked at redacted. You looked at briefs that were redacted. Why were they redacted? Wasn't that to keep the facts hidden from you? Yes. And your meetings were designed to educate the government about domestic violence trauma sufferers? Yes. You never discussed the facts or testimony or preservation. You never discussed the facts or testimony? Yeah. This presentation you gave, that seminar, that was 10 years ago, right? Yes. And you gave it once? Yes. On that topic. But given since, not on this topic. Correct. You're published on child abuse? Yes. And started talking about some of her lectures. And you're an expert in trauma affecting memory in a forensic setting. Yes. Malingering. Tell us again what malingering is. It's the false production of emotional response. How common is that? It's very uncommon in a clinical setting because there's no reason to present that you have an emotional feeling about something. So it's not very common. What about forensic setting? With forensic meaning a courtroom setting, about 10% of the time. 10% of the time. Oh, thank you so much. God bless you. And you talked about prevarication. Yeah, that means lying. Is that common? Not common. It can happen. In criminal trials, she's like maybe 30 to 40%. It's a high number. Ever permitted to view facts in a criminal case? No. It's always blind. In criminal, yeah, it's always blind. The academic and research, you get your conclusions from academic and research and literature. She said scientific studies, I rely on scientific studies of groups of individuals and how many suffer PTSD. You've been retained by the government before, right? Yes. Have you ever been retained by a defense attorney? Yes. Have you ever been retained by a defense counsel in this room? Yes. Oh. Have you ever been retained by a defense attorney in this room? Yes. So Agniflio is sitting here blowing her up as how she's not reliable. And someone sitting at his table has hired her in the past. We were all like, oh. I don't, just to be clear, I don't say that. I'm not audible. I'm not someone, if I'm sitting in a movie theater, you're not going to hear a peep out of me, okay? I'm not one of these people who's screaming, get out of the pool. No. But I heard, we heard throughout the room, oh, because there are a bunch of Zoomers or, Gen Z, I don't know the difference, who are covering this. And they were having a great time. They were having a great time. All right, let's get back to Cross. As soon as she said, yes, I've been hired by someone else, thank you. I have nothing further. Sits down. Maureen's like, yeah, the defense, they hire her also. All right, don't sit here talking to me. They hire her too. But not so fast. Not so fast. Because the last laugh ends up being gotten by the defense. Final words, I'll tell you now, not to spoil the ending, but the last word comes from the defense. Give me one moment. I just got to make sure. Because I just got to check my Rumble. I got to check on my Ghetto. And then it's been a nightmare. It's been a nightmare. But I didn't have it open here. Give me a moment. Zan says, Joe, is there really anything as an independent expert? Do you find someone who agree with you what you're trying to go after and improve? You are 100% correct. This is one of the reasons that lawyers... One of the reasons lawyers and doctors don't tend not to like each other. Doctors think that, hey, because we tend to get lumped together. Doctors are like, hey, we're trying to treat people. We're trying to help people. And lawyers are just scummy people who are looking out for their own bottom line. But you have to realize that lawyer experience with doctors are these people. And from the perspective of a lawyer, these people, these doctors who come in and testify, they're going to say whatever they're paid to say. And they're supposed to be independent. They're supposed to be giving you their honest opinion. But in insurance, a doctor who works in-house for an insurance company to testify against personal injury has never seen anyone injured. They could be coming in there with their arm hanging off by a skin, and they're like, "Hey, looks totally fine to me." And then you have personal injury attorneys who is like, "Oh my gosh, look at how that cervical spine is just lunged out." I don't see anything. You see how that's a massive, very painful, very, very painful, very debilitating. Doesn't matter. Oh wait, that's doctor. You're looking at the wrong lumbar spine. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, over there. Now you really see it. And we're just like, you're all full of crap. None of you are telling the truth. So that's why lawyers tend to have very little respect for doctors. Just saying. So we're up front that, hey, we're in business to make money. You're in business to make money, but you actually try and cloak yourself in nobility. That's where you get the friction between doctors and lawyers, in case you're wondering. In case you're wondering. All right. So, final comment coming from Agniflio. Gets back up there to recross. You say you testified. So when we last left off is she just said, I've been hired by someone in this room from the defense table. So you've testified for the defense? Yes. The defense for violence and domestic abuse attorney in this case? Yeah. And when you talked about that, you were referring to Mr. Steele. Is that correct? Yes. That's Brian Steele. That's right. Brian Steele. Everyone's darling, the one who stood up to Judge Glanville. She was hired once by Brian Steele. And in that case where he hired you, you were he was defending a woman who was accused of shooting her husband 5 times. Isn't that true? So who's she standing up for? Yeah, she's hired by a defense attorney. But in that circumstance, she's standing up for a woman claiming that she'd been abused. So you say, yeah, every woman is abused, and that's why that's why he hired you. Yeah. And so he goes, so that's why he hired you. And she goes, I don't want to talk about my professional assessments because I don't think that's professional. So I'm not answering that question. Okay, that's fine. But he didn't put you on the stand, though, did he? No. So he basically saw you and said, I don't want to he saw your work and said, I don't want to put you on the stand. Judge goes, counselor, move on. There was not even an objection. The judge is like, okay, now you're pushing it. Now you're pushing it. He's like, counselor, move on. Oh my gosh. That's what happened. Brian Steele hired you. He saw your work and said, I'm not touching this woman. She's not taking the stand. So, yeah, you were hired by someone in this room, and that's to stand up for an alleged domestic violence victim, and he didn't want to touch you. There's nothing that stopped you from reviewing the transcript here of this case, was there? Coming back to the whole blind thing. There's nothing that stopped you from reviewing the transcript of this of the testimony here. Objection sustained. You talked about malingering, an emotional state that's helping irrespective of the truth. Yeah. In a court setting, you're trying to learn the truth, aren't you? No, I'm trying to look where all evidence and data points work. And you looked, so you're trying to look at where all the evidence and data points to come to your assessment. Yeah. And you looked at nothing here in this case, though? No, I didn't look at anything. Okay. Nothing further. And the tone was just like, okay. You keep going with that, honey. You keep going with that, honey. We're all going to buy that. Nothing further. And that was it. That was it. So there you go. There you go. The last witness of the day was George Kaplan. Just to round out, George Kaplan was someone who was working as the assistant COO for Combs Enterprises, working under Diddy from December of 2013 to December of 2015. And he explained how his job was basically to be the gopher. He was called the assistant chief operating officer. And he got a promotion to work as assistant to the chairman. Who's the chairman? The chairman is Diddy of Combs Enterprises. Combs Enterprises oversees all his other assets. He reported to KK, that's Christina Karam, and he's supposed to carry Diddy's bags, his clothes, and meds, and basically run around making sure everything that Diddy needs is done. Very much like the personal assistant David James, from what near as I can tell. And he testified that his hours were from his day would end He's like, I can't tell what day my day ended because it ended a different time every day. What's the earliest your day ever ended? 6 p.m. What's the latest your day ever ended? 6 a.m. Oh, okay. How much are you getting paid? $125,000 a year. And they show him pictures of his co-employees there, and then he said, "Is Diddy very demanding? Yeah. Could he be intimidating? Yeah. Can you tell us about time he was intimidating?" Well, there was he once asked me to get him a gallon of water, and they didn't have gallon bottles, so I bought 2 half-gallon bottles and brought it back, and he was very angry. So he was yelling at you? Yeah. How far away was he standing for you when he was yelling at you? He was in my face. Oh. How often did he threaten to fire you? About once a month. That's funny. And he gave me a speech about how he needs to be surrounded only by the best. And what was the tone of that? Sometimes it was angry. Sometimes it sounded motivational. And you have to set up hotel rooms. Yeah, I'm bringing a hotel bag. So the first time I did it, he gave me a hotel bag, and then I saw what was in the bag, and I tried to set up the room like that going forward. And the bag had clothes, it had liquor, it had baby oil, it had candles when he would set up hotel rooms. You use a corporate credit card, and Defender KK, that's his right hand woman, told me to set up a hotel. Where to set up hotels in LA, in New York, in Miami. Whose name would you set it up under? Frank Black. That's the alias for Diddy, is that he would always go with the name Frank Black. And do you ever see guests or female persons there? No, I never was there. I would go home. I was also part of the cleanup crew after he would leave a hotel, before the hotel would come to clean up the room. Oh, okay. Well, why would you? What would the room look like when you came out of there? Lots of empty bottles, Gatorade bottles, liquid baby oil bottles, liquor, baby oil. There'd be bottles everywhere, and there'd be oil everywhere. One time I saw crystallized powder by the bathroom sink, so I washed that off and cleaned that before the hotel got there. Why was it necessary to have cleanup instead of just letting the hotel clean it up? Well, that's part of your public image. Hotels would sell videos and images to embarrass celebrities, so that was to help protect his image. You never saw guests there? No, I'd go home. And would he ever contact you from those hotels? Infrequently. Sometimes he'd be like, bring me food or clothes or drugs. And what'd you do? I did what he asked. And he had a medical bag. Yeah, the medical bag had Advil, Tylenol, ketamine, other things in the bags. Yeah. The other things in the bags he said, I picked up drugs twice. One time there was MDMA, and how'd that come to be? He said, the defendant said to me that gave me a phone number. I said, call this guy up, tell him you want to get a pickup from him. And then he gave me cash. And then I called him and I met him. I gave cash. He gave me a brown paper bag. I brought it to Diddy's house and I gave him the bag of pills. That also happened by the Bel Air Hotel. He ended up meeting the drug dealer in Hollywood. Diddy gives him cash. He gives the cash to the guy, gets a brown paper bag of pills, and he goes and gives Diddy the bag. And that's where we stopped for the day. Questions? What should I do now? That's the question. I have that video that I'm going to reset up my link. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up my I was supposed to do a link at 10:45. That didn't happen because I ended up streaming to the wrong place. I think I can use a template for this. That's weird. That's weird. Yeah, but this is so painful. Such a disaster. Such an utter disaster. I'm setting up to redirect you in case you're wondering. You can see how long it takes me to do this. It doesn't take very long. It's actually pretty quick. I'm almost done with setting up 2 different streams. Okay. I set up my Rumble Studio, and now I set up on YouTube. What a disaster. I can't believe I did that. That's so embarrassing. Let me redirect you over. Okay. I'm going to land my plane here. I hope tomorrow, by the way, in case you're wondering, getting back to the Diddy trial. Tomorrow, I just set up my stream for the following program, which is a show I'm going to be going into in 2 minutes. As soon as I close out here, you can basically do a countdown. You're going to be redirected over there immediately, or you should be. And I'm going to urge you to just be aware that tomorrow Kid Cudi's supposed to take the stand, and it should be fire. Should be fire. So I hope you'll check that out. Please make sure you like, share, subscribe, because you're never going to find anyone who's going to boomer nearly as hilariously as I will. That's one of many reasons that you should be doing that. And I got lost. Okay, here we go. And that's my Diddy coverage. I drop 2 videos a day, do a lengthy breakdown, and go team. I will see you over on the following program. In 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, you're going to be redirected over there. I'll look totally different, obviously, and the separation will pain me far more than it pains you. Know that. Know this. Know this. It will pain me far more than it pains you. And I will see you there. But those of you who are only interested in Diddy, I say to you, I thank you for your time and attention. Good night and Godspeed.